Mayhem Campaign Diary number 7. This one I may actually end up just tying into the next one that I make. I guess it'll depend on how long this ends up being in the end. We'll see. The session began with the party carrying the body of Alicia to the leader of the hobgoblins. I said bugbears, but I didn't this time. And negotiating for the hobgoblins to leave early now that they knew that they wouldn't need them because there wasn't going to be an invading army. They chose to take a long rest rather than try to travel to Azrael's family and report the success of their mission. They knew it would take them 4 days because of lack of roads to get there. And they still wanted to explore the rest of the Arcane Engines. But before they rested, they decided to partake in some brief mental torture of their captive Pavos, in which they threw down the body of as they believed it, his girlfriend, basically. And then were demanding information from him, information that I think they forgot they pretty much already had. Pavos was, as a trained soldier, not really intimidated and was refusing to give them the reaction that he knew that they were looking for. And he started calling them like infernal half-bloods and referred to Tristan as, I think, a fey freak or fey folk or something. Or I think he said what more could be expected from infernal half-bloods and fey folk. At one point actually I believe it was Gideon decided to kick him in the testicles for being called the infernal half-blood. It was at this point that they realized that they had left his armor on him, and kicking him did not exactly go so well. Tristan then immediately removed his armor, and then the next time such an attack was made, it was successful. Long story short, after several insults were thrown, several loogies were hurled as well, Pavos was dead. His throat was slit, and then Garion cut off his head so that he would be able to carry it into a town and collect the bounty. They chose to take a long rest. They did not post any guards or a watch of any kind, so as far as they know, everything went fine. In the following morning, Suri took plenty of time with the horses, petting them and feeding them, before everyone went back down into the Arcane Engines to continue exploring. First thing they did was return to the Arcane Gate to see if they could figure out just what the deal with the machine was. They knew that, or they were able to figure out that the machine was not powered on anymore, that whatever had been powering it was gone. Suri the Halfling decided to neglect to tell everybody that she knew what was powering the machine and that she had taken it out. And Tristan, after failing to figure out how the machine worked, was too busy trying his own methods of getting the machine to work and was whispering sweet nothings to the doorway and caressing it softly. So he also did not tell them that what they needed to do was to reinsert the scroll case that they had removed. Instead, Garion found the place where it had been and then placed what they don't know. It was something they found on Alicia's body, was just a chime of opening, a weak magic item. But when he placed it in there, the machinery started to hum again, just lightly. The controls there even had the glyphs on them began to light up as well. Azrael, after a rather decent Arcana check, I told him he was certain that the gateway would be able to be opened one time for sure, and then maybe up to 3 times if they were lucky. It was with that they decided that what they needed to do was explore the rest of the ruins to see if there were any more Fey creatures that would want to go back to the Feywild here. And so here they went back to the central chamber and decided to go through the northern door, or the 12 o'clock position on the map that we're using. After successfully performing some puppy dog eyes, Suri was able to convince Tristan to, instead of cast invisibility on himself, to cast it on her, and she would sneak ahead and make sure everything was safe. The next room contained some broken vats, some containers. There's glass all over the floor, and this silvery black sludge as well. But she did not move out into the center of the room, which was the key here, and instead moved around the side of the room to the next doorway. And going further down, she found another chamber in which she found it was covered in webs, and there was a gigantic spider there. Because she was invisible and had made an incredibly well done stealth check, the spider did not detect her, and instead she decided to run away, basically, to get away from the spider, but neglected to close that door. That becomes important later, I'm sure you can imagine. Now when she returned and Tristan asked what she saw, and all she had to say was a blue spider, Tristan, becoming rather enraged, began to raise his voice, and that is what alerted the presence of a mercury ooze, or alerted a mercury ooze to their presence in the room. And that rather was kind of spread out over the broken glass and mixed in with some of the other sludge, and that was where combat began. Then it had a surprise attack on Tristan. I should have had it roll with advantage, but I didn't. I forgot, now that I'm only now remembering as I'm recording this. And it missed, and then combat began. The ooze itself actually, luckily, rolled highest, so it did go first, and on its next attack it was successful in hitting Tristan and grappling him. On Tristan's turn, we had a long moment where we needed to discuss whether or not heat metal could actually affect this thing. Looking into it, I don't think heat metal is meant to affect things like constructs and such, but I thought it was a really cool idea, so I let it work anyway. Although Tristan decided not to go with it because he was currently wrapped up in part of it, so that it would affect him too. Instead, he was able to successfully escape the grapple, fly higher, and then heal himself. And as the rest of the party started closing in on the room, Gideon came in with a ray of frost and successfully hit it and then lowered its speed by 10 feet, which this thing only had a speed of 10 feet, so it was basically stuck in the room. So everyone was out of its range, so it didn't get to do anything during its turn. Tristan heated metal, and then Suri and Garion used range attacks on it. And then Azrael came in, and once again with another ray of frost, and I described it as hot metal being rapidly cooled, that it exploded and basically became a fine dust all over the room. And then Tristan immediately demanded that they take a long rest because he had used up several of, or most, if not all of his higher level spell slots during this. And they did not take account as to which room they were sleeping in, or to even set up a watch. And while they were discussing what was going on, I asked, I think 3 times, like, so everyone's going to sleep, like everyone's taking a long rest. To clarify, everyone did choose to rest and there was no watch. Later on, it was revealed that actually they probably could have had the Gideon's Tressum take watch, but I've got a lot of things to track of, and I can't keep track of all of that in my head. So that was forgotten, and basically the face spider from earlier had discovered that the door to the room it was in had been opened and that it could leave, and so it did. And the first person it found on its way out was Suri. The entirety of the party was basically woken up to the sound of Suri screaming as the spider bit down on her. Initiative was rolled. Tristan went first and opened up with a vicious mockery, I believe, in which he basically compared the spider's face to an asshole, and I described it as that it like lifted up its head and then dropped Suri and then just had a sad spider face as its feelings were hurt. The face spider had a very short-lived combat. I don't even know if it did get a second turn, but barely even that, really. Because once it got to Garion and he moved, not even sleeping in his armor, he just moved over to it with his sword, and with being level 3, he's a battle master now. He performed a trip attack, successfully knocking it down. On its turn, it got up, tried to bite him, failed because of the disadvantage it was suffering from the vicious mockery, and then Garion decided to use Hellish Rebuke on it, which finished it off. We did not even get through the full round of combat. These remaining encounters that I had were not really meant to be challenges on their own. They were just smaller things that were kind of supposed to help whittle down the party as they were exploring this place. But like I said, they decided to go straight to the end. And so there was the big bad at the end was not something they really had to worry about now. Which with Roll20, this has actually given me something to think about. One of the advantages of not having a full map that you're working with is that you can move, if you only map out the rooms in which the battles are going to take place, and you can move them wherever you want, whereas if you have a full map, you have to stick with what you got. So unless you want to use like some sort of video game logic in which basically there's a path that has to be followed, or that in order to get through this door, you gotta go to the end of this door to find this key and then come back and do that. Without that, well, really, it just goes to show there's no way to really control what your players will do. That was all that was managed to get through this time around. They have 3 more rooms to get through in the Arcane Engines, and assuming we get to start earlier than usual, I'd say that they will probably get through them next session, but we'll see what happens. So may all your 20s be natural, and you have a good night.